Great, well, thanks very much, Mike, and welcome everyone. It's great to see so many people out today. Before we launch into our morning sessions to consider prehistoric Perth and Kinross, I'd like to just take a few moments to set the scene, refresh our memories of what the framework's all about, give you a bit of a progress update of what we've been doing in this first year, and provide a little bit of landscape context. Now, conscious we're running a little bit behind, so I might cut a few corners off this, but hopefully it'll still make sense. Just to recap, PKARF is a 3-year project. It began in August 2018 to produce the regional research framework for the Perth and Kinross local authority area. And its primary aim has been to produce a resource that assists the development, control and commercial planning archaeology sector. Now, we're realising this through a 3-phase work plan, beginning with assessment and summarising the extent of current archaeological knowledge, and then through specialist contributions, review and targeted discussion with stakeholders, such as today's conference. We then aim to identify the gaps in the knowledge base, establish a series of research questions and priorities to address them. The result is hopefully a framework that we can use appropriately and economically to direct future archaeological research, whether that's developer, academic or community-led. It's a project which we hope will provide practical outcomes and assistance for everyone from regional residents and visitors to historic environment managers, to curators and interpreters, and to anyone considering or undertaking research in the region. And in both process and product, we hope the framework will raise awareness of the historic environment and encourage public engagement with it. Now, over the first year, we've been getting the discussion going, making contact with active researchers and specialists, and gathering data sources together to review and assess the status of our current knowledge. Now, as Mike mentioned, we've over 4,000 monuments and listed buildings of national importance in Perth and Kinross, but this is still only a small fraction of the 18,000 records that are held in the region's historic environment record. So a big part of year one has been taking this raw information, breaking it down into manageable, meaningful data sets, and then taking a look at that data. So moving it from something that looks like this, massive clouds, and turning them into spreadsheets and distribution maps that are a little bit more like that. As part of that knowledge assessment, we've also brought on board specialists for each of 8 major chronological periods, spanning the known human activity in Perth and Kinross, from Mesolithic through to modern. These are the champions who you'll be hearing from today. Now, through their knowledge and experience, combined with the refined HER data and maps we've been feeding them, the champions have then been reviewing what we know, and today they'll be offering their take on what we still need to find out and how we should be going about doing it. Now, the champion reports aren't intended to be the definitive answers, but they offer a strong baseline from which we can widen the discussion through consultation and events such as today. So, consider what you hear from the champions as provocations. Make use of the comments cards to make notes, and as ideas come to you, fill them in. You can do it online as well, and bring your knowledge and your experience to the think tank and help build a strong and effective framework. Now, you may be wondering what the story is with the environmental side of things. Well, we've got a suite of champions on board in that regard as well. We're hoping to have a separate session on environmental research matters later in the year. We do have the combined workshop with Mesolithic this morning, so if you've got interest in environmental, then sign yourself up to that and go along, or equally feed in your views through the comments cards. Now, speaking of environment, the natural environment plays a seriously influential role in determining the character of human activity across time and landscape. How and where people choose to settle, work and interact with one another are all shaped to some extent by the environment around them. So before we look at the past human activity, let's consider a bit of the landscape of Perth and Kinross. Perth and Kinross is located in the heart of Scotland. It covers over 5,000 square kilometres. It's the 5th largest unitary authority in Scotland. It's an extensive area that overlies two of Scotland's major geological units, the Grampian Highlands and the east central lowlands of the Midland Valley. The Highland boundary fault divides Perth and Kinross into two main units, Highlands and Lowlands, reflecting geology, topography, vegetation and land use. It's a region of outstanding natural beauty, encompassing both highland and lowland landscapes, characterised by a diverse mix of rural and urban land use, from the main population centres in Perth to extremely remote communities such as Kinloch Rannoch and the Highland area. Now, the topography of the region is largely the product of similar glacial processes acting upon varying underlying geological structures. To the south of the fault line, the broad, flat, fertile straths correspond with the soft areas of sandstone eroded during the glaciation. The fertile soils that now cover these areas are the result of glacial drift deposits and eroded material carried down by the rivers from the Highland glens. The post-glacial raised beaches of the Carse of Gowrie contain some of the richest farmland in Scotland, but prior to the agricultural improvements of the 18th century, it was marshy due to its formation of uplifted marine clay. The two ranges south of the fault, the Ochils and the Sidlaws, are igneous intrusions, presenting the distinctive characteristics of the Highland boundary fault geology. Having been tilted, these hills now form south-facing dip slopes and north-facing scarp slopes. The Gask is altogether different, formed of soft red sandstone with rounded ridges, but notable for the quartz dolerite dike that runs through it. I think Andrew will have a few things to say about the Gask a little bit later. Now, moving north of the Highland boundary fault, we've got generally harder rocks, metamorphosed from sedimentary rocks that have resulted in higher elevation, despite being subject to similar glacial processes. Much of this area is covered in either moorland or blanket bog, indicating higher rainfall and less fertile soils. Where upland glens are being created or enlarged by glaciation, the more fertile soils occur on drift deposits, which support agriculture. Around Athol, the landscape changes abruptly from the open moorland to a large valley landform with glacial steep sides, enclosing a predominantly flat, open floodplain of the River Gowrie. Here, the less resistant limestone has led to distinctly different soils and vegetation, notably forests of large trees and fertile farmland around the Blair Castle estate. Now, at the western end of Loch Rannoch is an area of blanket mire on a large open flat plateau, which forms Rannoch Moor. It's not only significant as a highly eroded granite basin encircled by the mountains, but it's also one of the best examples of a blanket peat bog in Scotland, preserving the stumps of many deciduous trees that have been gradually consumed as the bog developed in the post-glacial conditions after the last ice age. Moving to the bottom of the region, we can't forget Loch Leven. It's a flooded lowland basin that formed when the retreating ice sheets scoured a hollow in the softer sandstone between the harder Lomond Hills, Cleash Hills and the Ochils. It's long been a focus for settlement, and the land surrounding the shallow loch is characteristically flat, with extensive areas of marsh and wetland and an area of valley peat at Portmoak at the foot of the Lomond Hills. Thinking about the hydrology, the River Tay is Scotland's longest river and the foremost in Britain in terms of discharge. Its catchment covers around 5,000 square kilometres and is fed by over 70 freshwater lochs and 7 other significant rivers, including the Erne, Eamon, Tummel, Gowrie and Isla. As we're about to hear, the Tay carves its way through a deep, rich and varied historical landscape, abounding with sites of cultural significance and regionally distinct vernacular buildings. The historic environment of this region is an incredible material record of lives shaped by landscape, lived across millennia in the catchment of the Tay, its connecting rivers and the Leven. So without further ado, what I'd like to do now is welcome our first champion, Dean Wright, to start us off on our 10,000-year journey through the region's past with his take on the state of knowledge, gaps and priorities for the Mesolithic. Over to Dean.